Welcome to the Raising Moo podcast, where we are talking about empowering parents with easy to understand practical strategies to confidently guide their children's emotional growth. I'm your host Gilbert, along with Grant, and together we are Raising Moo.
Okay, hey Gilbert, I just want to talk to you a little bit about some of the fun that I have at work with some of the clients that I work with. I mean, obviously, a lot of the kids that I work with are pretty dysfunctional. And, you know, while this podcast is for parents with regular kids for the most part, I think it's really interesting to see some of the case studies of where things have kind of gone wrong for a child, or where there's been kind of massive disruptive impacts on their development. And, you know, just talk through those, because I find them absolutely fascinating. I'm actually, you know, it's real fun for me to be able to go to work and go get this kid, and I'm like, wow, this is real interesting. And I do get some really cool ones. And what I want to talk to you today is the one that is outside of the norm of what I normally work with, because I got a call one day from education and they called me up and they said, hey, Grant, we really want you to work with this kid because we are at our wits' end with him. We don't know what to do. And, you know, so I said, okay, well, tell me a little bit about this kid. This is how a lot of my conversations start when I get new clients. So somebody will call me up, child safety, education, you know, a parent will go, oh, this is my situation. And I'll listen to it and I'll go, okay, I think I can have an impact or not. And they go, oh, this kid's in prep. And I'm like, whoa, hang on. Yeah, I don't work with preppies because they are like 5. I said, how old is this kid? He's 5. He's just turned 5. And I said, wow, that is pretty young. Like most of my clients would be 8 to 15.
Can you do 47-year-olds?
I can if they act like an 8-year-old.
Wow, I can jump on the floor.
A lot of them do. But you know, it was outside the norm for me. I because I do wilderness and adventure therapy. You know, 5 is pretty young. And so I said, okay, well, look, tell me about the situation. Maybe I can give some advice. And they said, look, this kid is just off the charts. It's every day. He's like super disruptive at school. They saying that he has 60 incidents a day on average. And I'm like, 60 a day? That's a lot of incidents. I said, and that's the whole school day? No, 2 hours. He goes to school for 2 hours every day and has on average 60 incidents a day. And I'm like, wow, that does sound interesting. I said, well, what's the situation with this kid? And they said, well, he's recently come into care. He was in a very disruptive, dysfunctional, abusive parental situation. He was taken off his parents, his mum, and put into a family-based placement. And the carer is apparently great, but she's struggling and the school is just a disaster. So I said, look, you know what? I really don't like young kids going into resi care because that's, you know, it's so real tough.
So what's the difference between the family care you spoke of and resi care? What is the...
Okay, so most kids would be born into a family and they have mum and dad.
Yep.
Okay, and then you have kids that are in a situation where the mum and dad, for whatever reason, are not suitable to be parents. And look, it's a tough situation because I think all parents have the opportunity to make changes, acquire skills, do things differently, and actually re-enter a child's life. So every kid that I work with that's in care, when I say in care, their parent is the government rather than their mum, the biological mum or dad.
Yep.
Okay. But I always think that the biological mum and dad should be offered a pathway to reunify with that child. And I think that's a fundamental of my therapy practices, that we need to respect those family relationships. And if we can achieve that, we want to always have that on the table, somewhere on the table. And then if they go into state care, so typically what happens, and we've got a little bit of offshoots here, but typically what happens is there'll be concerns raised. Either a doctor, next door neighbor, somebody go, hey, that family should not be having a child. Or that child seems to be in danger. Or that child turned up at the emergency room and he's covered in bruises. He looks malnourished. We concern for his welfare. Then those notifications will then get assessed by the child safety department. That assessment will then warrant further action or not. And the threshold is real high, like people think, oh, that kid's been mistreated. He's definitely going to get taken up. No, you'll be surprised at how bad it has to be before they will actually remove that child from their home. And I actually agree with that. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But they can then get taken onto a temporary custodial or a temporary guardianship order, where a more thorough investigation. So they do an initial assessment, not suitable at home, remove the child. We will then do a more thorough assessment, and then we either put in structures in place to return that child to their parents with structures and supports in place, or we'll go long-term guardianship, which is basically the government will be the parent until the child's 18. And at that point, they either get placed ideally with a family-based placement, so foster carer, a person, wonderful people out there that will say, I will take in a child that is not my own, and I will give them a family environment to grow up in. If that family environment breaks down or it's not available because there's not a lot of those lovely people out there, then they go into resi-care, which is basically a house run by youth workers and agencies, where as much as they might want to try and create that loving environment, in reality,
it's not a family.
It's not, because it's a worker that comes in, does a shift, goes, works in 3 or 4 different houses, and those kids are usually tough. I mean, they are difficult kids to deal with. And, there will be times where the worker just wants the shift to end. They just want to go home and have some peace and quiet, and they're tired of all the drama. And that is different from a family-based placement where, there's drama. We've got to deal with that drama because that kid isn't going anywhere and I'm not going anywhere, and we've got to deal with that. So this kid was in a family-based placement, and I was really concerned about the high level of dysfunction in this kid's behavior, because if that family-based placement breaks down, you're going to have a 5-year-old going into a resi care placement, which really is a very slim chance of that child ending up as a normal adult. So anyway, I said, look, he's too young. I don't think I'll be able to work with him directly, but what I might do is I might attend a stakeholder meeting and bounce up ideas around. In the stakeholder meeting, he just became more and more fascinating to me. It was like, oh my God, all the stories were just like, wow, this kid is, mate, he's a one in 1,000, like you don't often get a kid that has had that much disruption in their life and has these types of behaviors, and they were really struggling. So I said, okay, you know what? I really want to support the carer. I don't want that placement to break down. I'm happy to work with the carer and the child, try putting some parenting practices, try getting some structures within that care environment at that family-based placement, and hopefully that will support that child. So that's what we did. And I went and I met them. And when I met the kid, I was blown away because it was not anything that I was expecting. I was expecting high-level behaviors. When a child's been neglected, I was expecting a reactive attachment disorder. I was expecting...
What is, that reactive attachment disorder?
So,
in 2 sentences, so you don't go on for now.
So what happens is when your child is first born, you have a lot of eye contact.
Yep.
And that child feels safe and secure in the physical space of the parent. Okay, and that creates an attachment bond where that child sees the adult as the nurturer, the provider. If that provider doesn't actually create an attachment with that child, they ignore the child, they neglect the child, or they hurt the child, that attachment doesn't occur. Okay? And if that attachment does not occur in the first year of life, and if it doesn't occur in the second year of life or the third year of life, you will typically end up with a disorder called reactive attachment disorder, which is where a child does not learn how to have a secure and loving attachment with another human being. They'll be a loner pretty much for the rest of their life, and they will only really be concerned about themselves, and they will see other people as a threat rather than as a support.
Okay,
so
cool.
A lone wolf, and that's a very difficult disorder to deal with because it's a lifelong disorder.
Yep. Okay, cool.
So this kid, I was expecting that. I was also expecting fetal alcohol syndrome, which is where because the mother was apparently the biological mother was a drug user and alcohol user during pregnancy, which can affect the brain development of the child. Now, he may well have actually fetal alcohol syndrome, but it wasn't apparent like it is with other kids. So I was thinking, okay, this kid's actually a bit of a firecracker. Maybe he would be suitable for a venture therapy session. So after that meeting with the family and meeting the kid and seeing that he actually was quite a likable, I mean, he would come up to your space. He didn't have a personal boundary space. So, I mean, clearly he hadn't really learned social interaction skills properly. But it wasn't like he was aggressive. I felt comfortable that he'd be safe in a vehicle. I felt comfortable that I'd be able to manage him in an external environment. And, I really wanted him to get an opportunity to have an adult authority figure come in, do stuff with him, and have him be dependent on that. That's what I like about wilderness and venture therapy, because I can take my 5-year-old. If I go on a bushwalk with him, he knows that there's no way he could survive if I was not there. So we can have a lot of fun on the bushwalk, but at the same time, he's going, I'm so glad I've got a caring adult that's going to go make sure I don't get eaten by a snake, and that creates that foundation for a healthy authority relationship. And clearly didn't have that at school. So it was really front of center of me was like, okay, I need to get this kid to see adults as welcome supports rather than disciplinarians, horrible people.
Yeah, which is what you'd expect. Like that's what normal families are like, I guess.
Yeah.
Which he hasn't experienced.
He hasn't experienced it. So that's why he's having such disruption at school, because he doesn't know how to function in a normal way, because he's had a very abnormal upbringing. Makes perfect sense in the totally abnormal upbringing, makes no sense in the real world. And my job was to try and bring him back into the real world. So I took him on a bushwalk. It was pretty funny. He's only got little legs and he was getting a bit tired. So, and I wanted to show him the waterfall. So I said, look, why don't I just hoist you onto my shoulders and then we can walk there. And also that creates that healthy, strong bond, like that physical connection, because if a child has been physically abused in their early life, an adult taking physical force and ownership of their movement of their body and like putting them in a vulnerable position on top of my shoulders can be a distressing thing. And so be able to do that and have a fun outcome and having a great time with it helps kind of counteract the negative experiences you would have experienced in early life. So I hoisted on my shoulders, went for a bushwalk. Mate, this kid was so social. Every bushwalker that came past us, he's like, hello. And then he thought he was the king of the castle sitting on my shoulder. He loved it. And I put him down on the ground. We would literally go 5 or 6 meters and he'd go, Grant, can I go back on your elbow? Can I go on your elbow? Because he hadn't learned language skills. So a lot of the stuff that he would say would actually use the wrong word because he hadn't been spoken to as a little child. So he's 5 years old. He's acting like a 2-year-old. And what I could see was he's acting as a 2-year-old because he hasn't learned to be a 5-year-old. It's not that he's not capable of being a 5-year-old. He's actually got a lot more capability than what I was expecting, but he hadn't learned how to do that. And took him out in a wilderness environment, put him through what would be typically quite a fear-inducing situation, and he just aced it. It was marvelous. And I thought, okay, this kid is actually pretty cool. I want to see what I can do to help him. And I had a subsequent adventure therapy session with him where I took him near a cliff edge, and I really did that environmental stress and me as the safety security person. And then I could see him being worried, but also he did defer to me. I was expecting him to run away. I was expecting him to want to go, I can't trust the situation. I can't trust other people. I can only trust myself, and remove himself, because that's what he was doing at school. He wasn't listening to the direction of the teachers. He was leaving the classroom, being disruptive. And I was putting him in a situation where I was thinking, okay, I'm going to be able to replicate those negative behaviors. He didn't. He actually wanted to be right close to me. And I thought, okay, there's a lot to work with here, because this kid actually wants guidance. He actually wants to do the right thing. He actually wants to be safe. It's not like he's expecting to get hurt and therefore it's just normalized. He wants the good stuff. And so then I went back to the school and I was like, well, can you give me a bit of insight into what are these 60 incidents? It's a lot. It seems a lot, And, I'm like, it can't be nice to be in trouble 60 times in 2 hours. That's once every 2 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like, that's constant drama.
Yeah.
And then I got some of the reports, and I won't go into too many details, but they were absolute gold as well, because this kid was just doing stuff which a dysfunctional kid does because he's a kid, not through malicious intent. And I was just reading through all these really official sounding letters, like, we are informing you that you have breached the Education Act on this by being a unsafe person at the school. And I'm like, wow, this kid's 5. He's only just turned 5. And, one of his incidents, probably we shouldn't go into all but throwing things on the floor, walking out of the classroom. A lot of times they say, hey, if you're going to get upset, walk away. But when the kid walks away, why are you walking away? Like, they don't know what to do. And what I said to the school is, I said, look, this kid, he's got 13 years of school ahead of him. He's only in prep. He is operating like he's in kindy. He hasn't been to kindy. He hasn't learned those skills. He hasn't learned to sit still. He hasn't learned to follow the group. He's been isolated in a dysfunctional home for years and years, just been taken into state care, and he isn't starting prep with all the skills the other kids have got, which they've acquired at home and at kindy.
Yeah, so his normal is not like all the other kids in kindy's normal face, because of where obviously the challenges he's had when he's been younger.
Exactly. He hasn't learned a scrap of the stuff which is the assumption of the base understanding of every kid that comes to prep. Every kid that typically goes to prep, or you guys out there with your children, you think when they went to prep, they're waiting. They want to go to big school. They're like, you've been to kindy, you know your ABCs, you can write your name. You know how to listen to a story time. You know how to sit down on the mat when the teacher says. You know how to go outside when the teacher says. You know how to have your break and your snack when the teacher says. You know all those things because you've been doing it for years in kindy. And we've been doing it at home. Hey, let's go have a bit of a snack now. Let's have a bit of a break. Let's go do this. I'm going to read you a story. All those things have been layered on for years and years, that when you come into prep and the teacher says, everybody sit down, everybody knows what to do. Not this kid. He's like, what are you talking about? I mean, he thinks shoulders are elbows, like he doesn't even know normal language for stuff. Swearing, mate, one of them was for swearing. When you told the teacher, F you, trouble. You're in trouble. But what happens when that kid has heard that hundreds of times a day in normal language?
Yeah, that's his normal
language.
Yeah. He doesn't probably even understand quite what he's saying.
Yeah. That F-U statement can actually mean, I don't understand what's going on. I need help. I don't know how to say I need help, but I do know how to say F you, and then you give me attention. And that's what I find so fascinating with the stuff that I do when I look at these kids, because, very rarely do I get a kid with psychosis where they've got a altered sense of perception and functioning in their brain, like mental health disorders where they are crazy.
Is that more like where there's like a chemical imbalance, kind of
structural imbalance, head injury, something that's chemical imbalance that kid does not actually perceive things properly. Meningococcal meningitis is also a terrible effect on a developing brain of a child and can actually permanently alter the way that they operate on that neural way. Whereas, I work with kids with abnormal behaviors that are structurally normal kids, but because of an abnormal environment, they have abnormal behaviors. So then what I do is I unpack the impact of that abnormal environment, teach them how to operate in a normal environment. And because they're a normal kid, they are then able to function. And with or you guys out there with your kids, what I'm hoping to do is for you to take those little tricky bits and go, okay, I don't know what's going on with my child. I don't know how to kind of deal with this because this is not normal. That I can then give you some insight into, okay, well, look, this is a different approach. This is things to look for. These are ways to redirect that. Like me taking that kid and hoisting him up on my shoulders. He thinks I'm just trying to transport him to the waterfall. But what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, adults can be physically dominant of your physical being and it not be a bad thing. Okay. I can actually put you in a vulnerable position and you're going to be grateful for that because I actually care for you and I want you to be healthy and safe because I'm a adult, wise. I'm your superhero that is going to be there to protect you from the snakes, the dangers, the embarrassments, the emotional hurt that could happen. If I can reset that understanding about what is the role of an adult in this child's life, that's going to help them. You know, with your kids at home, you know, if they're being disrupted or they're struggling in a particular area, you know, it's your role as a parent to come in there and go, okay, how do I move them through this? How do I identify what is actually the roadblock? And then how do I then put stuff in place that then helps them to develop skills or change perceptions or change belief systems or thinking patterns that then overcomes that roadblock? Because essentially you've got a normal kid. You've got personalities, you've got skill sets, you've got dispositions, but you've got a normal kid. And if they are allowed to blossom in the way that they are, that's your role as a parent. You know, you want to take a kid and you want to look through the behaviors into what's inside and go, there's a lovely kid in there. There's a delightful, wonderful kid with these personality traits, these skill sets, this kind of disposition, this spirit, this personality that you're going to then blossom. And if you can do that through the different phases of their life, you're going to end up with an adult that you're going to go, you know what? I'm so proud of my child because they are the opportunities that they've taken, the way that in which they've grown up, they have blossomed, they have been able to exemplify the hopes and dreams that we had as a parent. Like we know we have done well. And it's not about being first. It's not about being the smartest, most intelligent. I'm not going to tell you how to make your child the winner. Okay. I'm going to tell you how to make your child your child. I'm going to tell you how to have that child blossom in their own right to be their own best version of themselves without the damage and bruises and chunks of hardship that come through unfortunate experiences or unhealthy learnings in life. You know, and we all have it. Like, I mean, nobody's going to be perfect. We all have warts and all. I mean, like every parent goes, oh, wow, I wish I had known this years ago because then I would have done it differently. But you can still do stuff now and you can still have that experience of that child going, you know what, I'm grateful for everything that my parents have done for me. I'm grateful for the way that they have helped me through the tough times, celebrated the wins, being there as my role model, my hero. But I've got this now. You know?
So just cut you off a bit.
Yeah.
Round tripping.
Yeah.
Back to the original the kid.
Yeah.
What other things could they do when he's in this environment with the school or at home that could help potentially integrate him or get him to better understand how to or learn those skills?
Well, yeah. Okay. You know, thanks for the redirection there, Gilbert. But, you know, what I've assessed in this situation is that this kid has not actually acquired those skills that would normally get there. So we've got to actually put those in place. So when it comes to school, we've got to put in place a joy of that. That school is just an empty box in that kid's mind. What happens to his first few experiences at school is what's going to define this is what school is. And that will be then kept as a belief about school for the rest of his school career. So when you've got an empty box, you want to fill it with nice stuff. You want the kid to want to go to school. So if that kid's not able to function in the classroom, don't put him in the classroom. Put him outside. Do fun stuff. Bring him into the class to do the movement break. You know, say to the teacher, that's what I said to these guys.
So what's a movement break for people who are not from Australia?
With kids, especially in the junior schools and the earlier years you use them more, you'll have like a learning period. And then, you know, the kids are like, oh, they get a bit of brain drain. So then the teacher will put on a music video or some music and everybody get up and do a crazy dance for a bit. So just a bit of physical activity, or they might go, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're all going to walk around the classroom and then we're going to go clockwise and anti-clockwise, or we're going to, you know, throw, some, fluffy toys that we have in the classroom with your neighbors. You're going to get in groups of 4 and you're going to throw it to each other and see who can catch it the most, and once you drop it, you're out. Like, you can have stuff like that, fun things which you do, which take away from the mental learning, reset physically, and then you're ready to go for mental learning. Okay. And a kid like this, you can kind of go, okay, well, if you don't know how to follow the group, well, you're not going to want to do your alphabet. You're not going to want to do your sight words because you're not even there yet. You know, what you need to do is come in for the movement break, play with the fluffy toys, do a crazy dance. When that's finished, you go out. What does a kid learn? He learns, when I go into the classroom, I do the same as what all the other kids do. And that becomes normalized. He then expects, when I'm in the classroom, I do what the other kids do. Okay? Because it doesn't always have to be movement break. It can be story time. Once he's got the movement break sussed, mate, bring him in for story time. Oh, I found a story. Oh, Little Red Riding Hood. That's a great story. I want to listen to that. You know, a narrative approach to having the kid sit still. How does a kid learn? That kid needs to learn how to sit still in a chair and remain there. You know, that is a skill which he's assumed to have, but he doesn't have. And if he doesn't have it, he's got to acquire that. So how does he acquire that? He acquires that by sitting down because he wants to sit down. Because it's good. Because if I sit down, I listen to the story. And if I don't want to sit down anymore, then I can leave. And when I'm there, I'm sitting. And I'm sitting quietly, I'm listening. And I'm paying attention. And I'm taking it on. And then I might get asked a question. Who knows what Little Red Riding Hood was running away from? Was it a goat? Was it a sheep? Was it a wolf? I know, it was a wolf. Oh, well done, you got the answer right. That teaches them there'll be questions. It's normal in a classroom to be given questions, and you've got to think about what the answer is. Who was Little Red Riding Hood going to visit? Her friend, the shop, or her grandmother? Oh, wow. I know the answer to that one too. It's the grandmother. You know, so that's what a kid that is dysfunctional should not be seen as a bad kid. You know, this is what it kind of breaks my heart when I get a kid and they go, you know what, this kid is bad to the bone. I'm like, no, he's not, mate. He's not bad to the bone. Like, if he's 18, he might be bad to the bone. He might be on his way to becoming bad to the bone, but there's still a vulnerable, scared little child that's trying to make the best of a situation in his messed up, immature, unwise way of operating. And it's our role as adults to kind of use our wisdom, our love, our nurturing to rewire some of those things. I mean, we are natural human beings, and it's, you know, I'm really big believer in you've got everything you need in you already. We just need to enhance that. We need to support that. There's a collective responsibility to raising kids, and what we are doing is we're drawing out what's lying there dormant. There's seeds in there, right in our DNA and in our brain structures that allow us to then become the blossoming person that we are. And it's our role as adults, and especially the role of parents, to identify what type of flower this is, what type of fruit is going to be born, and what type of nutrients they need to actually do that. You know, you don't want to overwater some plants. I mean, if you've got a cactus, you don't want to put it in a mangrove, okay? If you've got a mangrove, you don't want to put it in the desert. So you've got to be able to understand your child first and foremost, and understand what is working for them, what isn't, do what works, don't do what doesn't. And it will be different for different children. You know, it's not true that you can go, well, I've had two kids raised in the same, and what? No, they're two different kids. They might be in the same household. You might need different approaches. You will need different approaches for different kids. So, you know, we'll go through a few other case studies as well. I really enjoy my work. I really like to see the kid underneath all the stuff, all the baggage. And there's a kid in there that we've got to get out. Bring them into the light. And it's a joyful process. I mean, I have so much fun with kids that teachers, it's their worst nightmare, you know. And I'm always going into meetings where they're going, oh my God, this kid. And I'm like, we just had the best time. You know, we laughed our heads off.
Frustrating for the teachers.
It is a bit, but you know, I had the luxury of having a one-on-one relationship with that child. I have the luxury of being able to be totally immersed in their world, in that moment. And teachers don't have that. They've got a curriculum. They've got a job to do. They've got lessons that they've got to deliver. They've got a whole class to do. So society.
But you've also got the skills and the knowledge to apply, to take when you're working with those kids, to actually sometimes just stop and listen.
Yes.
As a rough example, obviously I'm just like layman, but what I'm meaning is that sometimes they just want to be heard or they just want to ask a question. And obviously sometimes, like in this example, a school environment with a lot of kids, it's not conducive to that.
No. And then the kid gets labeled as not capable when they are capable. They're just different.
Yep.
And yes, that's the experience of working with 1,000 odd kids over the course of 25 years, allows me to kind of go, oh, I've seen this before. I've seen this many times. I know I have a pretty good guess as to what's happening over here, where the block is and how we can remove that block and let that kid be released to be their own beautiful self, and that's what I want to share with all the guys out here.
Cool.
Yeah.
So thanks. I'm going to cut you off again.
Okay.
Because I think that's enough for today. Otherwise, we're going to be up for another hour.
We will. Okay. Cheers to that.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. No, go. But that was.
Thanks for joining our Raising Mood podcast. We covered some fantastic insights, and I hope you walk away inspired and have some new tools to build a stronger relationship with your kids. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe and leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Or share it with a friend. It really helps us grow. A huge thank you to our amazing listeners. You make the show possible. This is Gilbert and Grant signing off.